London Airport, and the first all-jet airliner, the de Havilland Comet, returns from a flight that has made world headlines in civil aviation. From London to Libya and back, 2,980 miles in 6 hours, 38 minutes.
Today, airplanes are a common sight in the skies, from the trusty Cessna 172 to the iconic Boeing 737. They're as much a part of modern life as cars or any other mode of transport. But not all planes are created equal. Some are so rare that only a lucky few have ever witnessed them in flight. Don't believe us? Let's dive into some of the rarest airplanes of all time that you've probably never seen. Starting off with a plane that quite literally defines rare, the one and only Antonov AN-225 Mriya. Star of the 2009 disaster movie 2012, affectionately nicknamed Mriya, meaning dream in Ukrainian, is in every way one of a kind. Staying true to its name, this absolute unit of a plane is so massive that it could carry a whopping 550,000 pounds, or 250,000 kilograms of cargo internally. That's about the weight of 100 full-grown elephants. Or if you prefer something closer to home, it's like loading 50 fully loaded semi-trucks onto a single aircraft. Yeah, that's impressive. First flown in December 1988, the six-engine beast was designed by the Antonov Design Bureau in the Soviet Union. It was originally created to transport the Soviet Buran space shuttle, which it carried on its broad upper fuselage like a backpack. Its wingspan stretched a staggering 290 feet or 88.4 meters. That's longer than a football field. And its maximum takeoff weight of 705 tons cemented its status as the heaviest aircraft ever built. But the crazy thing is, the AN-225 wasn't just about size, it was about purpose. Over its operational life, it transported everything from wind turbines to disaster relief supplies. Wherever there was a need for a colossal cargo hauler, the Mriya delivered. Tragically, in February 2022, this flying legend was destroyed during the Battle of Antonov Airport in Ukraine. Only one AN-225 was ever completed, so the world truly lost a superplane with legendary rarity. As we speak, discussions about rebuilding the second unfinished airframe keep its dream alive, but the costs running into billions make it uncertain. The AN-225 wasn't just a plane, it was a global icon. Aviation geeks adored it, and spotting it on the runway was like seeing a unicorn. It wasn't just rare, it was irreplaceable. And speaking of rare, have you heard of the quirky and compact McDonnell XF-85 Goblin? Stay tuned. The McDonnell XF-85 Goblin, in more ways than one, is the definition of small but mighty. We're talking about a jet fighter so tiny it could fit inside the bomb bay of a B-36 bomber. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? But this was real, and it was really bold. You see, the Goblin was an ambitious experiment designed in the late 1940s to be a parasite fighter, meaning it would hitch a ride with a bomber and deploy midair to defend its mothership from enemy fighters. Cute sci-fi idea, yes, but the execution, let's just say it had its quirks. First flown on August 23, 1948, the Goblin's design was as peculiar as its mission. With its potato-shaped fuselage, stubby wings, and forked tail, it looked more like a flying cartoon character than a menacing war machine. At just 14.1 feet long, or 4.3 meters, with a wingspan of 21 feet, or 6.4 meters, it was smaller than a minibus. But don't let its size fool you. This jet packed a punch, with 4 50 caliber machine guns and a top speed of 648 miles per hour, or 1,043 kilometers per hour. That's way faster than any sport car could ever dream of. Unfortunately, the Goblin's daring concept faced some massive turbulence, literally. And of all its problems, the biggest issue was docking, making it a nightmare for pilots. Reattaching the Goblin to its mothership midair was like threading a needle during an earthquake. Flight tests revealed it was just too risky and impractical. Add to this its limited speed and agility compared to standalone fighters, and the project was grounded by 1949. Throughout history, only 2 prototypes were ever built, making it one of the rarest planes in aviation history. Today, these quirky relics rest in museums, one at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Ohio, and the other at the Strategic Air Command and Aerospace Museum in Nebraska. While the McDonnell XF-85 Goblin might not have been a practical success, it sure was an imaginative leap. It was practically the aviation pioneer version of What If that'll always have a special place in the hearts of airplane enthusiasts. Now, speaking of ambitious designs, let's look at the sleek and stealthy world of the Lockheed A-12 Oxcart, a plane so advanced it practically disappeared into thin air. Yeah, this one is kind of wild. The Lockheed A-12 Oxcart was a plane that redefined stealth, all while being a beauty that wasn't just ahead of its time. It actually felt like it flew in from the future. The Lockheed A-12 Oxcart, lovingly nicknamed the Oxcart, was like a shadow racing through the Cold War skies. Born from the legendary Skunk Works division of Lockheed, this high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft was so advanced it made radar operators question their equipment. And that's because this baby was designed to fly faster, higher, and quieter than anything the Soviets could throw at it. The A-12 first spread its wings in 1962, but it wasn't officially introduced until 1967. Powered by twin Pratt & Whitney J58 engines, this titanium marvel hit jaw-dropping speeds of Mach 3.2. That's over 2,100 miles per hour, or 3,380 kilometers per hour. To put that into perspective, it could fly from Los Angeles to New York in under an hour. And at 90,000 feet or 27,400 meters, the only thing you'd see out of its cockpit window was the curvature of the Earth. Not bad for a plane built in the 60s, right? But here's the catch. Only 15 A-12s were ever built. Why? Well, secrecy was the name of the game. And it was a game played so well that these aircraft weren't even acknowledged publicly until the 1990s. To make it worse, its short operational life of just about a year meant that only a handful of people ever got to see it in action. And those who did, let's just say they were sworn to silence tighter than a drum. Today, the A-12 sits in museums, a quiet proof of the genius of its creators and the intensity of the Cold War espionage game. Yet for all its sleekness and speed, the A-12 laid the groundwork for its more famous sibling, the SR-71 Blackbird, proving that sometimes the greatest trailblazers don't stick around long enough to take a bow. Now, speaking of ambitious designs, let's look at something wildly different. The Hughes H-4 Hercules, better known as the Spruce Goose. This one's a giant in every sense of the word. The Hughes H-4 Hercules was a massive plane nicknamed the Spruce Goose. This wooden, yes, wooden behemoth was the brainchild of the ambition and ingenuity of Howard Hughes' relentless drive to defy the odds. Despite flying only once, this plane managed to make a name for itself. And why wouldn't it? It was a transport plane so massive it could carry 750 troops, or 2 Sherman tanks across the Atlantic. At 218 feet 8 inches or 66.65 meters long, and with an unprecedented wingspan of 319 feet 11 inches or 97.51 meters, roughly the length of a football field, the Hercules dwarfs most modern aircraft. In fact, if you laid its wings flat, they'd stretch across 2/3 of a city block. And to make it even crazier, it was made primarily of wood. Birch, not spruce by the way. But why wood? Wartime aluminum shortages forced this creative pivot, which is why it's lovingly or cheekily called the Spruce Goose. This 8-engine giant had its singular moment of glory on the November 2nd, 1947. Piloted by Hughes himself, it lifted off the water for a stunning 26 seconds, flying about a mile or 1.6 kilometers at an altitude of 70 feet or 21 meters. While brief, this single flight cemented its place in history as one of the largest things to ever fly. But here's why it's so rare. Only one was ever built, and that was because of a mix of cost ballooning and its sheer size making practical use questionable. After its maiden voyage, the Hercules never flew again, but was lovingly preserved. Today, it rests at the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in Oregon, where you can marvel at its engineering marvels up close. The Spruce Goose wasn't just a plane, it was a statement. a dream that refused to be grounded. And speaking of ambitious dreams, the next plane on our list was a supersonic masterpiece that sadly was cut down before its time. The Avro Canada CF-105 Aero, for lack of a better word, was the stuff of aviation legend. This jet wasn't just a plane, it was Canada's declaration of brilliance in aerospace engineering. A sleek delta-wing beauty designed in the 1950s, the Aero was meant to defend against Soviet bombers in the Cold War. And boy, did it pack a punch. With a maximum speed of Mach 1.9, which, by the way, is around 1,307 miles per hour, or 2,104 kilometers per hour, and a ceiling of over 50,000 feet, or 15,240 meters. It could soar higher and faster than almost any rival of its time. This thing could travel from New York to Miami in just over an hour. Now, that's speed. The Aero wasn't just fast, it was a tech marvel. It featured cutting-edge avionics and a fly-by-wire system, making it feel like a spaceship rather than a jet. But sadly, despite its jaw-dropping specs, this Canadian icon never got the chance to shine, as only 5 prototypes were built before the program was unceremoniously axed in 1959. Why, you ask? Well, blame politics, shifting military priorities, and brace yourself, a total destruction order. Yep, every piece of this masterpiece was scrapped, making it a ghost of what could have been. The Avro Aero now exists as a bittersweet symbol of innovation stomped out. Next up, a plane that carried a nuclear reactor on board. Yep, you heard that right. Stay tuned. The Convair NB36H is a plane so wild it sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. This was a behemoth of a bomber, not only cruising the skies but doing so with a nuclear reactor nestled in its belly. Yep, the Cold War had everyone thinking big, bold, and sometimes downright bonkers. And this one-of-a-kind aircraft was one of the most bonkers. It was so insane and so rare, it was the only one ever made. Dubbed the Crusader, the NB-36H was all about testing whether nuclear power could fuel future bombers. At over 160,000 pounds or 72,500 kilograms, or roughly the weight of 10 school buses, this beast was built to carry a 1 megawatt reactor right in its bomb bay. To keep the crew safe, the cockpit was wrapped in lead and a layer of super thick glass like a mobile fortress against radiation. Oh, and the reactor? It wasn't just cargo. It worked during test flights, producing heat and powering systems. Don't get it wrong though, despite its nuclear ambitions, the NB-36H still relied on 4 trusty jet engines for thrust. Think of it as a hybrid car, except way cooler, way scarier, and thankfully, way less practical. So, why so rare, you ask? Well, this flying nuclear lab only took to the skies for 47 flights, logging about 215 hours. And after a few years of tests, the US Air Force decided nuclear propulsion wasn't worth the risk. I mean, what if a crash scattered radioactive materials? So by 1961, the program was scrapped, and our friend the NB-36H was dismantled, leaving just its legend behind. The NB-36H wasn't a total dead end, as it gave scientists heaps of data on shielding and radiation, and even helped pave the way for nuclear-powered spacecraft. Pretty amazing for a plane that never went beyond the prototype stage, eh? But hey, if you thought this story was wild, wait until you hear about the Vought V173 Flying Pancake. Yes, a plane nicknamed after your favorite breakfast food. The Vought V173 was a plane so unique, so downright quirky, that it earned the nickname Flying Pancake. And no, this isn't a UFO, even though we can see why you'd think so. Besides its weird look, the Vought V173 was no ordinary aircraft. It was a boundary-pushing marvel, straight out of the World War II experimental era. Designed by Charles H. Zimmerman, this pancake-shaped beauty was a bold attempt to rethink how planes could take off, land, and soar. And oh boy, it didn't disappoint. Now, why the nickname? Just look at it. With a circular wing spanning only 23.3 feet or 7.1 meters, smaller than the length of a midsize SUV, it looked more like a breakfast special than a warplane. But its design was no joke. Those wide wings and tip-mounted propellers meant it could hover and maneuver like a dream at low speeds, which would have been perfect for aircraft carriers. It was powered by two Continental A80 engines, each producing 80 horsepower, enough to get this flying flapjack into the air. When it first flew on November 23, 1942, jaws dropped. This was a plane that defied convention. With over 139 hours of flight testing, it proved agile and innovative, though ultimately overshadowed by the rise of turbojet technology. Sadly, only one prototype was ever built, which is why this aviation oddity is a true one-of-a-kind gem. So, what happened? Tragically, the US Navy's interest waned, and the V-173 became more of a fascinating what could have been. But you can still admire its glory at the Frontiers of Flight Museum in Dallas, Texas. If you thought this pancake was groundbreaking, get ready for even more exciting content in our next video. So, which of these rare flying marvels surprised you the most? The record-breaking Maria, the quirky Goblin, or the stealthy Ox Cart? Or maybe the wooden giant Spruce Goose stole the show? Let me know your favorite in the comments below. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of aviation history, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Stay adventurous, keep exploring, and we'll catch you in the next flight through the skies of history.